What do Target, Home Depot, the New York Times, and the NSA all have in common? Well, it's certainly not paint, housewares, or secret documents. Have you guessed it? Sure you did. Security breaches. That's it for sure. It seems that a day doesn't go by when we don't hear of yet another high-profile breach that has made its way to the front page and the nightly news. These events have CIOs and business leaders intensely focused on their security policies and constantly evaluating and re-evaluating their defenses. One key item that should always be on the IT security radar is the critical area of authentication, authorization, and accounting, also referred to as AAA. As we are all painfully aware of, incorrect verification of identity and permissions, as well as poor accounting controls, can result in a successful attack on sensitive data or system functionality. So in this program, we'll offer IT and business professionals practical advice and best practices that will help keep organizational data secure and private. This report features expert Trevor Smith, Executive Vice President of Bright Computers, a full systems integrator and consultancy based in New York State. Bright Computers is a leading provider of network and data security, virtualization, computing infrastructure, and managed service solutions. There are several teaching points in this program. First, we'll present an overview of today's complex security landscape and ask how much is enough when it comes to access controls and data protection. Next, we'll review the core components of the authentication, authorization, and accounting process and offer advice and best practices to improve system and data security. And finally, we'll wrap up with a look to the future and some closing thoughts from our expert. Now, let's begin our report. In our first segment, we'll offer an overview of the authentication, authorization, and accounting landscape. So how much is enough when it comes to the level of AAA policies and technologies that organizations have in play? Well, that's a question IT and business professionals should continually ask themselves. Make it too difficult to shop, check your bank balance or log into a server at work, and you may lose or alienate customers. In the workplace, you'll likely frustrate the staff and lower productivity levels. Make it too lax, and you increase the chance of a breach, which could compromise the trust level of partners, employees, and customers. A catch-22 dilemma if there ever was one. The answer? Well, as you probably have guessed, it's to find the right balance between the two extremes. A major consideration in locating a middle ground in the AAA drama are the needs, wants, and desires of end users. To shed some light on that issue, the Ponemon Institute and Knock Knock Labs conducted an extensive research study. The goal of the study, which included some 1,900 tech-savvy consumers, was to understand consumer perceptions about how organizations go about confirming identity and what procedures and technologies should be in place to protect it. The study also offered interesting insights into how consumers prefer to be authenticated and identified. Consumer preferences regarding multi-use identity credentials and the use of biometrics for authentication and identification were documented. In addition, organizations that are most trusted by consumers to manage identification credentials were also noted. The Ponemon Institute and Knock Knock Labs research study revealed that a majority of consumers would use a multi-purpose identity credential to verify who they are before accessing secure data, systems, and physical locations. Banking institutions are considered the best for online validation, strong authentication, and identity verification. In addition, consumers believe banks would be the best to issue and manage a multi-purpose identity credential. Identification and authentication when traveling, accessing the internet, and using social networks are the most popular reasons to have a single ID. There is no clear consensus on what devices would be preferred to manage multi-purpose identity credential. However, the leading popular consumer choices are mobile devices, RFID chips, or biometrics. The survey noted that if consumers trust the organization, biometrics is acceptable to use for authentication. And finally, the study found that authentication is important when sharing devices with other users. Now, to learn more about the authentication landscape today, let's turn to our expert and interview guest, Trevor Smith from Bright Computers. Trevor, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.
Now, Trevor, I'm sure you'd agree that there's been a lot of turmoil of late in regard to the number of cyber attacks and security breaches involving some very well-established companies. It also seems as though a lot has changed in the past several years regarding how organizations need to approach security. Just give us a sense of the security climate of today. How have things changed?
Oh, thanks, Mike. That's a great question. The market for information technology and information security has gone through enormous changes over the last few years. It's well documented that the hackers of old, of just being a high school or college student in the basement, cyber crime has become a very profitable business. And as a result, you have very well-funded organizations driving cyber crime because there's extensive benefits, both financial and other. And you also now have governments partaking in cybercrime to, launch warfare, to attack enemies. So even we've seen our own government use cyber intelligence to defend our own country, our own freedoms against those who are trying to hurt us. We also see over the last 7 to 10 years a development of a chief security information officer or a chief security officer, a C-level position to address security within the organization. Previous to that, security was just a line item or a component of the CIO's job. And there wasn't a dedicated responsibility of security. Now today we see this dedicated organization, dedicated group to address the security concerns. And if you look at reports that are released about the top 3 initiatives within technology, security has been on the top or the forefront of people's minds for the last few years. And part of that is because the way we work has changed significantly. So no longer are we just working in a cubicle within 4 walls, protected by a firewall. Now we're out and about using our laptops, our tablets, our smartphones, and we're getting access to critical information from all of these different locations, from all these different devices, which creates more and more vulnerabilities for security professionals. So there's a huge change that's been occurring, both driven by the evil elements of cybercrime, but also just by trying to enhance productivity in the way that we work and how we can make our employees more productive.
Trevor, we're talking about a key part of an organization's overall security strategy today, that being network authentication, authorization, and accounting. When you talk to CIOs and business leaders, what are they saying about the challenges they're facing in this critical area?
Well, I think that there's a lot of challenges that are out there. They identify that legacy login and passwords are just not enough, that they need to do something further to make that authentication dynamic so that it's constantly changing. So if that those authorization credentials or those user credentials are stolen, that it's only a matter of time until they change again and they can protect the organization. But what we also see is it's not just authentication that's the issue. There's also an element of visibility. In order to write policy, the executives or the people writing the policy need to understand how people are using applications, how people are using devices, and what they're trying to get access to. And so there's a tremendous amount of visibility that's necessary for these users to be able to determine what they need to be able to do and how they're going to impose certain technologies. And then based on that, who's using what, when they should have certain access to information, and when that access to information can be limited to a certain amount of, limited in a certain way. We also see a significant threat about the privileged user. You look at a privileged user as someone who's supposed to have access to information, and they're supposed to have access to information for a certain period of time. But after they get access to that information, what do they do with it? And how can you make that access to information expire? So when you look at authentication, you might tie that to something like digital rights management or something else to add on to not just authentication, authorization, and accounting, but also tying it to other parts of security. Another key consideration within this area is also that IT professionals and information security professionals try to limit the operational impact of employing these types of technologies. And that operational impact both to the users, like the end users, and trying to make sure that it's appropriate to their information needs, as well as the operational impact to the support organization. And those have been two key areas that, as people are going through these studies and determining how to use this technology, that they need to be able to consider.
So how well do you think the challenges are being addressed by the leaders you've spoken to?
That's also a good question, Mike. As we talk to companies, some are doing very well with it and some aren't. As we look at how the organizations are structured, I think some of that has to do with the commitment from the board to the security office. Do they have a dedicated chief security officer? Is that chief security officer, do they have a budget line item associated with them? Are they able to make decisions and buy technologies to protect the organization? In some cases, it's the chief security information officer may not have a budget. They can make recommendations, but then it falls under the CIO to actually purchase that technology, implement that technology, and maintain it. Now, in a lot of organizations, a CSO and a CIO might see eye to eye, and they might work very well together to be able to put these tools in place. In other areas, they don't work very well together. And so you might have a chief security information officer who has a great vision, who wants to make things happen, wants to protect the organization, but a chief information officer who's going to restrict that capability because he feels that money should be spent in other areas to enhance other technology and not necessarily the security area. So as we look at the implementations, there's a little bit of give and take. There's only so much money available for technology, and depending on who's making the decision, they're going to make the decision that they feel is best for the organization.
Well, Trevor, it seems to me that this issue goes well beyond the IT department. Security in general, including AAA, has to be taken seriously from the boardroom down to the shop floor. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. You look at Target, for example. That breach was ultimately identified as a security breach with an HVAC contractor. I'm not sure. I don't have a good relationship with Target. I don't know about their security policies, but I'm not quite sure that there was a tremendous amount of training that went all the way down to that HVAC contractor. However, their HR department or their finance department or their customer support group may have a lot of security training. So you have to think not just about the key areas of the organization, but all areas of the organization, and make sure that everyone's properly trained on security policy, that you have the tools in place to gain that visibility on who has access to information, the type of information they have access to, and continuously monitor that to make sure that there aren't anomalies that are occurring. Why is a login for an HVAC user getting access to our payment system or our customer information system? So there's a lot of visibility components to this that need to be tied in.
Well then, how can a strong security culture be developed in organizations?
Well, Mike, when we talk to companies, it goes back to your question before. You have to have it from the board all the way down through the organization. Part of that is to do with culture. Is it something that is talked about in a positive way within the organization or a negative way? There's traditional ways of communicating out security policies. If you walk into a major Fortune 500 company, you may see posters near the elevator. There's emails that may go out. There's security policies that are posted on intranet sites within the organization. And some of those are more passive ways to communicate security policy and how people should behave in certain situations. We also like to implement technologies that help educate the users throughout the process. An example that comes to mind is one of our partners, Checkpoint, has a component called User Check. And as somebody tries to do something that's against policy, it notifies them that it's against policy and why and what type of action is being taken. And there's a number of different technologies that are out there to do that. But that helps make sure that people understand that their email isn't blocked for some reason or an action isn't blocked for some reason without them knowing it. It tells them why it was blocked. It tells them what they were doing wrong. And then it tells them what that remediation was. And that's really helpful to help educating people throughout the process.
Next, we'll review the core components of the authentication, authorization, and accounting process and offer advice and best practices to lock down system and data security. As we move through our report, one begins to understand and appreciate the complex challenges faced by IT and business leaders as they cope with the daily battle of detecting and preventing cyber threats and attacks. It seems as though as quickly as one type of threat is damped down, malicious actors dream up yet another method to penetrate and wreak havoc with systems and data. The battles are many, and the war definitely carries on. So to keep one step ahead of the hacktivists, cyber terrorists and thieves, what exactly is being done? To answer that question, we'll need to talk next about advanced authentication and authorization techniques and the associated tools and technologies. These new systems will further reduce the possibility of an organization being hit by a costly, reputation-ruining security breach. One next-generation identity and access management technique we'd like to highlight here are new solutions that develop an actual risk score for each system login attempt. The score estimates risk based on the profile and habits of the end user. An end user logging into their email every day at the same time from the same location generates a normal level of risk. However, the same end user logging into sensitive financial data in the middle of the night from a location 1,000 miles away from the office will generate a risk score that exceeds the user's threshold. Once that occurs, controls are automatically increased, necessitating the need to use a higher level of authentication, or, in the extreme case, being completely barred from any system access at all. Now, while organizations may always be on the lookout for the latest and strong authentication tools, they still demand that any solution adhere to the following tenets. First, the solution must be cost-effective. Second, be very secure. Third, be easy to use. And fourth, and perhaps most importantly, be a good fit considering the demands of today's complex business environment. Let's return to our interview guest to continue the discussion on this interesting and important topic. Now, Trevor, considering the risks involved, why do we still make our security controls so reliant on simple usernames and passwords?
Well, I think that the reasons vary probably from company to company, but a couple resounding issues that we see, or reasons for pushback from companies, that login name passwords are easy. And there's also a fact that there's some operational impact to the organization. You have to train users. You have to make sure that the authentication, maybe it's two-factor authentication solution, is compatible with not just logging into your PC, but all the applications behind that and the systems behind that. There's training, and there's also maintenance of these devices that has to occur. So while it may seem obvious to us as an end user, as especially a large organization with 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 employees, to make these changes is pretty significant, and it has a significant operational impact on the organization.
Well, it seems clear that usernames and passwords will be with us for quite some time, but that is just one element in the AAA process. Take us through and explain all of the core components.
Sure. So authentication is that first one that you're referring to, and that's really identifying the user, who they are, and we can do that in a number of ways. The legacy way is login and password. There's a more common way of utilizing two-factor authentication tokens. You may do something similar. People's two-factor is defined as something you have and something you know. You use that every day when you go and take money out of the bank with your debit card. Your card is something you have, your 4-digit PIN is something you know. And now we can utilize that within an organization for authentication, and that can be dynamic. A token maybe you have has a changing password for it. Your PIN stays the same. That password may be only available for 30 seconds, 90 seconds, whatever you program it to be for, but that's always dynamically changing. That then links with a back-end system which gives you this authorization, which is the second component of it. And authorization ties into what should I have access to. Based on being an executive, should I get access to our HR system, a finance system, our ERP or CRM system, and it gives you the appropriate authorization to get access to certain information. What we're also seeing that be tied to today is the type of device that you're using and the location of where you might be. So we add additional layers of authorization onto that. And the third layer is this accounting. And accounting is essentially tracking the activities of the users, both historically and also in real time. So if there is a security breach or some type of incident, you can go back and look and see who had access to what information, what were they doing at that time, and then in real time check for anomalies. For the target example, checking to make sure that someone isn't trying to access information they're not supposed to be accessing to.
And how can firms assess where they might have hidden vulnerabilities?
That's also a good question, Mike. Companies like mine, we help our clients with doing security assessments. So there's many organizations just like mine that will come out, sit down with the customers, understand their operations, utilize different types of security tools to assess what vulnerabilities may exist, and help make recommendations on how you can solve those vulnerabilities. In a lot of cases, auditors, they can be financial auditors or operational auditors or even industry-specific auditors, PCI, HIPAA, CGIS. They have auditors that will come out and take a look at your operations with the organization and make recommendations so that you meet the standards or the levels at which your peers are. There's also penetration testing and other types of organizations that can come out and really look for the vulnerabilities that may exist within your organization. We've also seen a new trend in checking your partners. A partner is someone who you may not be able to control, but you may share significant information with. So there's a company called Security Scorecard. And what they do is they check the vulnerabilities of your partners. You're going to share critical credit card information, customer information, HR information with a partner. You may want to know what their security vulnerabilities are. Instead of just getting it on a piece of paper with a checklist, you can now capture true information on what vulnerabilities might exist with your partners.
Trevor, are there any areas that come to mind where firms typically drop the ball with authentication and authorization controls?
Sure. It's hard to say how people are necessarily dropping the ball per se. There's a lot of intelligent people out there doing things, but I think one area that we see that's a difficulty is creating a single solution across the board. You have multiple job responsibilities within an organization. You have people who have certain needs. One user might be more mobile than another user, and they need to have appropriate security and appropriate authentication provided to them. If they're extremely mobile, maybe a biometrics is a better method than a two-factor authentication token because they're walking around all the time. Or maybe if they're stationary at a desk all the time, a proximity reader is easier because it's similar to the badge that they use to get into the building. So looking at the particular user, their job situation, job responsibilities, and the way that they work can be extremely helpful. As we are mobile users, my phone is sitting right here, and others will have their phone no more than 3 feet away from them. Maybe utilizing that as a two-factor authentication tool can be an intelligent way to get the user engaged, to provide them with the conveniences that will make security right for them. What we also see is that this AAA idea is not a single silo. It needs to be integrated with other technologies. It needs to make sure that it's going to work not just to log you into Windows, but also authenticate you to critical applications and critical systems, and make sure that if they're accessing information, that access to information is as dynamic as the relationship might be. I think we recently saw a study from the Department of Labor. The average employment is 3.5 years. So people only stay at a job for a certain period of time. So if they get access to information today, where's that access to information tomorrow? And utilizing tools like digital rights management tied in with two-factor authentication can provide the appropriate access to information, not just today, but also tomorrow.
Can you offer recommendations on how they can be avoided?
Yeah, I think a security assessment is a great place to start. Take a look at where the key vulnerabilities are, and then understand how those vulnerabilities may affect your organization. One vulnerability may not, bring the entire company down if it's breached. Not to say that you don't care about it, but it may not have the exact level of prioritization as in a different vulnerability. Maybe access to your financial system or R&D system that has your intellectual property is extremely important. So I think as an organization, you can have a company like ours or another organization run a security assessment, but then you have to use intelligence to determine what's the most it has the highest priority and what needs to be fixed the fastest, and put those things into a proper order.
So Trevor, now that we understand some of the pitfalls, could you offer us several best practices to effectively control access and protect data throughout an enterprise?
I think when you look at best practices, it's back to what we've been talking about the whole time here, which is we need to understand the way our employees work. And that, as I mentioned in the beginning, has changed significantly over time. We are getting access to information from multiple different sources, and we may need those sources based on the device we're using, the location we're in. We may need to have access be restricted to protect the organization. So I think the first thing that we like to tell our customers is gain this visibility into how people work and what they're doing. You can implement a number of different technologies to be able to do that, like network access control, security and incident event management, to really see how people are working within your organization. And then from there, you can evaluate different types of technology that fit the job descriptions and types of information access your employees need.
In the introduction to this segment, we talked about advanced authentication and authorization techniques. Tell us more about these advanced developments and when we're likely to see them become more established.
It's funny, biometrics it may be seen as something that's really advanced, but if you look at laptops for the last 4 years, they've pretty much all had biometric readers on it. Now it's just utilizing the software to tie that into the enterprise authentication system, be it an Active Directory or LDAP or whatever the directory structure is. So while biometrics may not be fully implemented, it's something that's been around for a long time. You think about more advanced technologies, you look at the announcement from Apple. They're coming out with their wallet, and Google has their own, Google Wallet. And this type of authentication tools or utilizing our smartphones is becoming more and more prevalent. Some of our bleeding edge clients are starting to, instead of issuing out tokens, instead of issuing out proximity cards, are starting to use the phone. Because we're used to using our phone to check in for an airline, to buy coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, or utilize these things. And as we see that work with our enterprise systems and our enterprise applications, I think you'll see smartphone becoming more of a enterprise authentication tool. So, in one more example, one of our partners is a company called Gemalto, and they have a one-time password solution. They've historically had tokens, but now they offer an app on my smartphone. So if I want to be able to log into my CRM system or some of my other web-based solutions, instead of typing in a password, I push a button on my app and it automatically logs me in. So really that's making my user experience very efficient and very secure, of course.
And Trevor, not all firms will have the resources and expertise to handle their system and data security in-house. So when choosing an outside provider, what should they consider?
So I think when we talk with our clients, one of the things that makes a big difference is to have a partner that understands your industry and understands your users, so that they can draw on experience from previous instances to help you understand what would make those employees more productive and make your environment more secure. Not every situation is cookie cutter. Not every hospital wants to operate as the exact hospital or the previous hospital, but there are experiences to be drawn on, especially as you look at security. There needs to be, you need to meet compliance requirements and other industry standards that an organization that understands the industry, who has experience doing that, will be able to help you with. The other thing too is that some organizations like to work with companies that are a one-stop shop. That they can do everything. They can give an assessment, they can make recommendations for technology, they can implement that technology, and they can support that technology going forward. And if your organization looks to a single one-stop shop, it's important to find an organization like that. Others like to separate those duties. They want to have someone come in and do an assessment and have a completely independent view of the recommendations to solve that. And there's definitely valid reasons for both. With that, you can look at organizations and take them for a test run. A lot of organizations provide free assessments. There's certain assessments we do that are free to show organizations what kind of information we can gather, how we work in a professional manner, and you get the opportunity to test out the organization, make sure they see the things that you see, they look at your business the way you look at your business, and determine if it's going to be a good working relationship. And the last point to consider is ask your peers. Your peers may operate under similar compliance requirements and may utilize a service provider that has proven to be beneficial. So asking your peers is a great way to find good organizations to work with.
Next, we'll conclude with a look at the future and hear added advice from our expert. In this report, we presented an overview of today's complex security landscape and asked the question, how much is enough when it comes to access controls and data protection? Next, we learned about the core components of the AAA process and offered advice and best practices to improve system and data security. Now, we'll conclude with a look to the future and some added thoughts from our expert. Trevor, if you look down the road a couple of years, what changes do you believe we'll see in terms of how organizations will approach their authentication, authorization, and accounting controls?
Mike, I think that's a great question. There's been a lot of changes on the front end and different types of tools that users can use, and I think a phone is being one of those. But also, it's the back end systems. There's a tremendous amount of work being done to integrate these systems together to make that easier for them to talk to each other. Identity access management solutions help to do that. And as they become more mature, as companies open up their APIs or open up the communications that can be done between applications, will only make those more efficient. So that when you walk into a company, you single sign on through all of your applications. And you see that a lot in healthcare today, but not as much in every other business that's out there. So I think that tying in and building up those back-end systems will be a major enhancement over the next few years.
And to wrap up our program, could you offer a core takeaway message for our viewers today?
I think if you're looking to implement a solution such as AAA, I think the first thing you need to do is understand the way that your employees work. When you hear a bump in the night, what's the first thing you do? You turn the lights on. And before you can embark on some of these types of projects, you need to turn the lights on within the organization. Network access control from companies like Forescout or security incident management from other organizations can help you gain visibility into what people are doing in your environment, how they're working, what information they're trying to get access to, from what types of devices, and then from there you can make decisions, intelligent decisions on which users need these types of secure and strong authentication solutions.
Well, Trevor, thank you so much for offering such great information on this critically important topic.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me on. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Well, that concludes our report, Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting Best Practices. I'm Michael Quinlan, and thanks for watching.